we loved what Ray was doing in Georgia. And we always know we are far more effective when we have people that are on the ground, that are trusted in the community. That is the key to relational organizing. So the work that Ray had done brought that. And so what we were able to do is overlay 21st century digital organizing on top of, or digital tools on top of the really wonderful 1960s style community contact and organizing that Ray was already doing. One of the things that we did with the tools is we're able to analyze who are the voters. So when we looked in some of the more rural counties, the voters that had us most concerned were older voters, voters that were 65 and older, because remember, we were still in the pandemic. So we wanted to make sure that those voters knew the rules and understood how they could either vote by mail or vote early. And then all of our younger voters, we concentrated on making sure they understood where they could vote early. Now, part of my background in another life is I was a database programmer. I developed applications. So knowing that you really needed to have a computer in order to find your closest, if not only early voting location, what we did was in our custom texting program, we incorporated the ability to, based on your county and your address, look up your closest early voting location. Nobody's technology can do that because they just haven't built it in. They're going, yes, states have early voting, so just tell people they can early vote. Well, when you know you're dealing with a population that A, probably doesn't have internet, and B, if there's no internet, they may not have computers, then you're going to need to make sure you're prepared to give them a lot of information. The data that we were able to pull out of our texting tool, we then took that information, and our phone bank scripts go county by county. So we can give people the information. Remember, you don't have a cell phone for everyone either. So we analyze before we even start working, who are we likely to be able to reach by text messaging because that is so fast? Who are we going to be likely to reach by phone? And who are the voters who are very rural and even urban, where we may not have a phone number, but we've got an address? So we postcarded all the BIPOC voters in Georgia twice. We postcarded them for the November election, and then we came back and had to do 2.4 million postcards for the runoff. The Center for Common Ground is a rather unique organization in that we were born virtual. So most of my leadership team is based in California. We are a 501c3 organization, and so we are partnered with 5 national faith organizations. So that translated into, we have 44,000 volunteers. Since our volunteers are not in our target states, they help us do that remote support where they handle the postcarding. In 2020, we sent 9.4 million postcards. As I mentioned, we postcarded all the BIPOC voters in Georgia twice, for the November election and then again for the January runoff. We just make sure they understand when, how, and where they can vote. What we're focused on now is an idea that I had back in 2015. And that idea was to go into local communities like what Ray is doing, but it would be permanent infrastructure. And so we call these things democracy centers. Most of our democracy centers, actually all of them, are in communities where when we look at the voters who are registered, there is a huge disconnect with them actually turning out to vote. In one of our communities that I'm thinking of specifically, 55% of the Black voters don't vote. They are registered. If they held an election tomorrow, they could go and vote, but they're 0 for 3, meaning in the last 3 federal elections, they have not bothered to vote. So democracy centers have a really simple goal, and that goal is to convert basically non-voters into voting rights activists. We talk to them, we find out what is your pain point. Have you been voting? We know they haven't. Why haven't you been voting? And what's important to you? What are your issues? Would you be willing to vote to change X, Y, and Z? And we developed community palm cards, which the people who previously hadn't been voted now take and knock on their neighbor's door and say, you know, it's really, really important that we vote in this upcoming election because of this and this and this and that one here. That was the one that I put on the palm card. So that's very, very powerful when your neighbor knocks on your door and says, hey, it's really important that we vote this year. There's always been a need for bottom-up focus in our community because the new bent and lean of political parties is they want the voter donors. Well, in most of our communities, people are definitely not donors and they're not voters either. So what we have to do is reach out to the people where no one bothers to talk to them because they're not that double win demographic. And when you look at close elections that were lost, there are always literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of voters who nobody bothered to reach out to them because they don't have a consistent voting history. When we won in Alabama 2017, we specifically went after voters in the Black Belt. And one of the questions we asked when we called them was, has anybody contacted you about this election? I'm talking Montgomery and Mobile and all the other counties in the Black Belt. And after 99% of the people we asked said no, we took the question out of our survey and just had to make the assumption that nobody had contacted all these voters. And at the end of the day, 85% of the non-voters that we had contacted showed up and voted.